Come on!
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. I am George Massey, back for podcast episode 2, carrying on from podcast episode 1, where we talked about happiness through association. Today we are going to be talking about the fact that everybody is creative and why that is relevant. Continuing on with the theme of happiness, it is because creativity, of course, leads to happiness. Now, before I start going off onto unnecessary tangents, words cascading upon you. Oh no, wait, I'm doing it. Let me stop. Right, creativity. This is a very major thing because people in our culture and society are told from often a young age that some people are creative and some people are not. That is not true. Everybody on earth is creative. If you think you are not creative, get it out of your head because you are. Do you go to sleep at night and have dreams? If the answer is yes, then you are creative. Do you know where dreams come from? Do you know those experiences sometimes when you go to sleep at night and you dream about somebody and that person isn't a real person? They materialize in your brain as though you have actually created that person, created somebody who does not exist in the real world, yet you've seen them, you've seen their eyes, you've seen their hair, you've seen the way they move. Do you know what that is? It is the fact that you have walked around the streets, you have lived a life, you have seen numerous faces. That girl who you saw once 10, 15 years ago on the street, a piece of her, her eyes, have appeared in your dream on somebody else's face. You have seen 10, 20 different faces and turned those faces into one, so that in your dream you're able to perhaps meet somebody who does not exist in the real world. Either way, if you believe you are not creative, again, let me throw this to you. A story, the beginning of a story. A man is standing in the middle of the woods and he carries with him a spade and it is raining. And a girl walks out of the woods and she stands beside him and she starts to cry and she looks up at him. What happens next? That is the question I throw to you. What happens next? And if you find that difficult, who is the girl? Where did she come from? Does she know this man with the spade? All of these things, they are for you to answer. And let me tell you, that is how writers write. That is how creativity begins, with only a scene, an idea. If you want a more obvious one, there's a girl in a cemetery and she's crying. What happens next? Why is she there? Is she crying for somebody she's lost? If so, how did she lose them? These things are creative. You are creative. We are all creative. Have you ever gone to the cinema and watched a film and come out thinking, it was okay, but the ending would have been better if this happened? Have you ever listened to a song and thought, I like the verse, but I don't like the chorus? Then you are creative, because that's what creativity is. Creativity is taking pre-existing things and turning them into something new, just like making yourself food, okay? When you make a meal, you take various different ingredients that already exist and you turn them into something you want. Well, if you're going to make a movie, you take various ingredients, which would be all of the films you've ever seen, all of the experiences that have ever happened to you in your life. You take them and you put them together and you create something you would want to see. Just like when you make yourself a meal, you make yourself something you would want to eat. Now, why is this relevant? Because I wanted to carry on the theme of happiness, and I cannot really get to that point without expressing the fact that there is no such thing as a non-creative person. I'm going to give you one more example of how everybody on earth is creative, because people might throw me the question, which I've been thrown many times, in regards to music, musicality. I, as you may or may not know, write songs, and I've done it for now more than half my life, and people say to me, how do you do it? Where does it come from? Where does that talent and gift emerge from? You must be lucky, you must be blessed like all the other songwriters who have ever lived. Well, part one of that story is scientists have discovered that everybody, in fact, has the potential to be musical. Because, did you know, let's go through from the beginning. If you were put into a pitch black room with no light for the first 5 years of your life, and then you were let out of the pitch black room, you would be blind for the rest of your life. You would never be able to see because your eyes need light stimulation in order to essentially turn on. Otherwise, the optic nerves atrophy and they die. Therefore, you are not even born with sight as a gift. Now let's move on to language. If you were left in a room for 7 years and nobody ever spoke to you, guess what? You would never be able to speak for the rest of your life. You would never be able to learn language. You would be able to learn words, but you would not be able to put those words into sentences. That is because the parts of the brain that develop language also atrophy and die if they are not used. Scientists refer to it literally as use it or lose it. If you don't use it, then you lose it. Now, when it comes to music, it's the same thing, only recently being discovered. You can play music to a child from as early as the womb. You can start to trigger those parts of the brain. Predominantly, they appear to be on the far left and right sides of the brain, and you can trigger that ability. You may notice, I have noticed, if you ever look after children, try singing to a child. Interestingly enough, they all often tilt the side of their head towards your mouth. Not the front, not above the eyes. They tilt the side of their head towards your mouth when you sing, sometimes letting you sing directly into the skull. Kind of interesting. But either way, it turns on a musical element. So when it comes to that gift of singing, the gift of understanding melody, it appears to be no more a gift than the ability to speak, which of course to ancient cultures, thousands of years ago, hundreds of thousands of years ago, hearing anybody in the modern day speak would have been considered an incredible talent, wouldn't it? People who were cavemen, if they listened to us having a conversation, access to thousands of words, talking vastly complicated sentences, they would think we were all geniuses. Well, I would presume that nowadays, though we look up to many musical figures, people who write songs, and we think them geniuses, in the future, the ability to write music, perform music, would be just as common as the ability to speak. But I hear people silently questioning as you sit wherever you sit or walk or do whatever it is you're doing. The question that I have been asked most often is, well, plenty of people can sing and plenty of people can play the guitar, but where does the ability to write songs come from in regards to creativity? Well, I have to say, I had no idea what the answer to that question was for about half my life. I wrote songs every single day from the age of 13. All I did was sit indoors with a guitar and write songs, and I never quite understood where it came from. I didn't play my songs to anybody. I didn't really want anybody to hear them. They were far too honest. It was like opening up my diary to the world and saying, here you go, know all of my secrets. And I didn't want anybody to know that, but I didn't understand either why some people could write songs and some people couldn't. I had friends who were much better on the guitar than me, and they couldn't write songs and I could. Well, either way, I'm going to tell you where the secret is. What the secret is, I'm going to tell you the answer to where the ability to write a song comes from. It's this, okay? When you speak, when you form a sentence, think to yourself, where does that come from? It is you having a desire to express yourself. There's something on your mind that you want to say. Well, how do you say it? Your brain knows hundreds of words, okay? And you don't need to think about it. You just grab those words and you turn those words into a sentence, okay? You want to express yourself, so unconsciously you grab all those words you know and you take the ones you need and you turn the words into a sentence to express yourself. That's what you're doing. So what do I do when I write songs? What does any songwriter do when they write songs? We do exactly the same thing, except we use notes and chords instead of words. Once you've learned the notes, once you've learned the chords, all you do is you want to express yourself, you feel around on the instrument that you're playing and you find the note, you find the chord, that's the one that expresses you, and you put it together into a melody, just like anyone else would put words into a sentence. We put notes into a melody. Both are forms of expression. It is not a unique gift that one person is creative and another person isn't. Everybody wants to express themselves, but no matter what, you always find that the situation a person is in is reflective when it comes to the kind of work they produce. For example, listen to Motown music. Isn't it always uplifting? Doesn't it have driving bass? Doesn't it make you want to get up and dance? Well, think about where those people came from. Joyous childhoods and easy lives? No, they came out of real difficulty and they overcame it, which created positive and uplifting music. But when you listen to a lot of indie music like Radiohead and the Deftones and a lot of stuff that I listened to when I was growing up, they're often kind of middle class white people who have been very protected as they were growing up, didn't necessarily have to go through terrible struggles and poverty, but what's the reaction? It's hard to learn how to adapt and deal with life. It's hard to deal with problems that somebody else would not consider to be problems. The point being that you might hear quite sad music coming from middle class white America or just Western, and then you hear very uplifting music coming from the black people of, say, the 50s or so. Now, as another example of this, something that I'm going to steal from the television show Lost, the show that started on a high podium and fell right off like an Olympic diver doing multiple somersaults and then belly flopping as he hits the water and everything goes to hell and rack and ruin. Yes, that show did fall very much off of its pedestal. But in the first episode of Lost, no, it's not the first episode, but the first season, one of the characters called Locke, I believe it's John Locke, though I could be wrong, he gives a wonderful analogy that is relevant to life. He talks about how when a caterpillar is in its cocoon before it becomes a butterfly, it goes through a certain amount of struggle. It goes through a certain amount of pain before it turns into a butterfly. And you can, theoretically, poke around the cocoon a little bit and help it as it's trying to break away its own shell, its own nest, its own womb, its own little sanctuary. As it tries to claw out, you can help it. But you know what happens if you help a caterpillar when it's trying to break out of its cocoon? It doesn't have the strength to live as a butterfly, and it comes out too weak to survive and it dies. Therefore, the pain that it goes through is a necessary part so that it knows how to deal with the obstacles that face it when it gets to the other side. So we are all but caterpillars, trying to break out of our shell. And the fact is sometimes we've been helped too much by our parents, too much by those around us, when really the child who is helped less but encouraged usually grows up to be stronger. And that is why you often say, well, that's why those people write uplifting music, because they know how to deal with life, and these people are writing sad music because they don't know how to deal with life. And I certainly fall into that category as well, because I've written hundreds of very sad and depressing songs, and only more recently have I started to get to grips to some degree with how to deal with this awful thing called life, which has had its hand around me, squeezing me tight for too long. So I decided to break the shackles and put my own hands around life itself and wring it like a towel and say, listen, you no longer control me, for I will control you, and I will live life the way that I want to, hopefully. Anyway, not really, I'm just talking a lot of nonsense. But creativity, the whole point of this was creativity. Well, in the last podcast, we talked about happiness through association, which was essentially about taking in all that you can in order to make you happy. But I have a personal philosophy, a personal theory you may agree with, you may not. I don't mind whether you agree or disagree. Tell me. I'll be more than happy. But here is what it is. I believe that when you were young, when you were a child, when you were growing up, that is the time for you to consume the most. You are a consumer as a child. You are not so much a creator. You are not of an age yet necessarily to create anything that is of particular value to the human race. There are exceptions, there are remarkable children, I do not deny it, but either way, the fact is, when you are young, it is time to consume. watch cartoons, play video games, read books, blah, 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 blah. But when you get older, you start to go through all kinds of trouble. And what is the use of creativity? Well, do you remember what I was just saying about how certain people go through certain things and they express themselves with, say, music or painting pictures or whatever it is you do as a form of creativity? Creativity, I'm going to say this, and I hope that it resonates with somebody out there in the world, because it's certainly true for me and I've used it for a long time. Creativity at its core is the ability to take something bad and turn it into something good. And since I believe we are all creative, it means we all have the ability to turn bad into good. And guess what? There is never going to be anybody who's going to live life who is not going to go through something bad. That is the way the world works. If we never went through anything bad, what would be the point of life? Overcoming obstacles is fun. That's why people like to play video games. If they were too easy, they wouldn't be fun. So, you will go through bad things. Whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. That is a fact. Even our very muscles that we have, when you strengthen your muscles, you are actually destroying a layer, and once they have been destroyed, it creates a new layer above them. So you destroy and then create, much like, say, compost. What is compost? It is dead vegetables and things like that. And when you put it on plants, they grow stronger. So from death comes life. The best flowers grow out of shit, Erica Jong once wrote. And that is very true for life in general. The best flowers grow out of shit. So, why do I say that creativity at its core, at its base, is the ability to turn bad into good? Well, let's look at something like Romeo and Juliet, still as relevant today as it ever was. What is it about? Ultimately, it is about two people who fall in love, who are not allowed to be in love because of external influences, because of parents who do not want their children to be together. Just like religious parents who will say, you cannot marry my daughter because you are not the same religion as her. This still happens today, and it happened then. And it's a great tragedy when two people love each other and are not allowed to be in love. There's a saying that I read once somewhere, and it said, when two people love each other, leave them alone. I always liked that. I thought that was very beautiful and very true. But the point is why is Romeo and Juliet still so popular? Well, a great story is in the telling, we all know that. But more importantly, it is because it is a sad thing, a tragic thing that we can relate to, and Shakespeare turned it into something beautiful. Out of the absolute darkest, he found light. And that's what resonates with us, that ability to find beauty within the darkness. When we listen to a sad love song, what is it that's compelling? It's the fact that we know they've gone through something bad, something sad, something tragic, and yet they've turned it into something very beautiful. They have managed to find beauty in pain. That's the best thing about creativity. Now, why is this relevant? Well, personally, I have come to the conclusion, after living my life for the time that I've been on this earth, I've come to the conclusion that not only are we all creative beings, luminous, as Yoda once said, but that creativity is at our core a necessary part of being human. Because if you were to ask me what is the meaning of life, I would say that is at the root of it. If you want a legitimate answer for me, what do I believe? I'm sure I'm going off on real tangents here, and you must be thinking, what in God's name is this guy talking about? But evidently, here it is. My personal belief so far in regards to what is the meaning of life, it is that we are here to make the bad good and to make the good better. That, for me, is what I believe we are here on the earth to do. And you cannot do that if you don't create. Everything we have is created. The technology you use, the light bulb, the house, the walls around you, even the trees that have been planted very precisely in the streets, the cars that you drive, your musical instruments, the music you listen to, the glass in the windows, everything around us is created. Ignore the TV and the television that tells you that an artist is somebody who sings. In most circumstances, an artist is somebody who sings somebody else's songs. That is not an artist. Look around. Look at the benches on the street. Look at the fences. Look at the designs of lampposts. All of these things are created. When you eat bread and butter, that bread doesn't just grow out of the earth. Bread is made up of all kinds of different processes and ingredients. It's not that easy. Creativity is everywhere. Now, why do I believe that this is our meaning of life? Because not only does it make people happy when they create, not only does it make people feel glad when they turn their bad experiences into something positive by creating something positive out of it, but because where do we come from? Well, nobody knows for sure, but the best evidence we have of where the human race comes from, where Earth comes from, is that we manifested from a supernova. A supernova is an exploding star, the greatest form of destruction that we know of in the known universe. Okay? That's because the elements found in the human race are the same as the elements found in a star. Remarkable. We are all stardust, as Arthur C. Clarke once said. But anyway, if we, the human race, are born from a star, it means that our own creation is born out of absolute destruction. Now look around. Everything you know, everything you've ever experienced, every thought you've ever had is the product, according to scientists, of destruction, a supernova. It took destruction to create life. So being that we are alive, it makes perfect sense that through our own negative experiences, we should be able to create positive, because we are positive to ourselves. Out of the greatest destruction known came us. That means from a negative came a positive. Now consider this. When you eat food, you are destroying that food in order to create energy. You are literally taking something out of the earth, putting it into your mouth, destroying it in order to create. So just the very cycle of our own living is a process of destruction in order to create. And as I mentioned earlier with muscles, you are destroying parts of the muscles in order to make bigger muscles. It's a constant process of destruction leads to creation. Now look around. Everything that is probably within reach of you right now, something had to be destroyed in order to create it. If you look at a book, trees had to be destroyed in order to create that book. If you're looking at a computer, all kinds of things had to be destroyed and pulled out of the earth in order to make that computer. The concrete, the wood floor, the wooden chair that perhaps you're sitting on, whatever it is that makes your bed, everything you look at that has been created, something has been destroyed in order to create whatever possession it is. Whatever you look at, whether it's a poster or a painting, look at the ancient paintings. Where did the paint come from? It didn't come from a shop. They had to pull things out of the earth to create the colors. Beetroot, for example, one of the earliest forms of dye, the purple in it, the colors that we have all around us, these things do not come from Walmart, they do not come from Costco, they do not come from Sainsbury's and Asda, they are pulled out of the earth. So everything you look at, everything you use, something had to be destroyed in order to create it. So that's on a physical level. To create something physical, something has to be destroyed. So when it comes to an intellectual level, when it comes to what we put out, like stories, like songs, like paintings, okay, it makes perfect sense that when we go through pain, we can use it to create positivity. You look around at the most beautiful poetry, the most beautiful theatre, the most beautiful music, it is normally born out of sadness or simply the pain that it takes to perfect an art form. I always liked in Charlie Chaplin's autobiography, he said that when he looked at Pavlova, the famous ballet dancer, he couldn't help but weep when he saw her dance, because to him she personified the tragedy of perfection, i.e., nobody achieves perfection without struggle, without a certain amount of pain. She personified the tragedy of perfection. I thought that was a brilliant line. So when I say pain, it could be an emotional pain, an emotional trauma that you went through or somebody went through and they turned it into positive, or it could simply be essentially the basic pain of improving, just like the pain you go through when you exercise. You feel that pain in order to improve, whether it's on an artistic level or a physical level. Anyway, before there is creation, there is first destruction. And if you would like to relay that even more to us, childbirth, is that not regarded as the greatest form of pain? No, the greatest natural form of pain. And from that pain comes us. So from the greatest pain comes life and creation itself. It's always the same thing. No pain, no gain. Ooh, I must have gone off on quite a tangent. Now, to end this, because I don't know if I'm going to do another podcast about happiness, because happiness is a very hard one, although I may, because I suppose I would like to venture into the question of relationships, perhaps the most depressing, difficult, traumatizing area of all of our lives. Perhaps I'll have to go into something in regards to happiness there, how to balance that, how to avoid all the negativity and the quicksand of relationships. Oh, aren't they a burden? Well, anyway, out of the greatest joy comes the greatest sorrow. That's why I suppose they are so negative. But on a separate note, Freud, good old Freud, that old chap with the little glasses, a bit like John Lennon's, except without the hair. Freud wrote anthologies. He wrote vast amounts of texts on psychology. He's the father of psychotherapy. He is the one responsible for all of the analysis that we have had over the past century. And despite all of that text and all the pages he filled, he came to the conclusion in the end that in order to be happy, man needs two things: love and work. Love and work, Freud said. What else is there really? So those two things, I believe he's correct. I agree with it. But let's keep one thing in mind. When he says work, he ain't talking about sitting behind a supermarket counter. He's not talking about sitting in an office doing something for somebody else. He's talking about work that makes you passionate, work that stimulates you, work that you want to do. That's the kind of work he's referring to. And when he refers to love, he doesn't mean lust, because lust is not something that was scarce in our own nature. There was a time when the human race didn't have clothes. We were all naked all the time, and there was all kinds of wonderful acts of fornication happening morning, day, night and afternoon. He meant love. People around you who love you and people who you love. So that's what he said. Love and work are what man really needs to be happy. But let's keep something else in mind in regards to this podcast and the last. If work makes you happy and we are all creative, then if you want to be creative, you have to consume, okay? You have to take things in. You cannot speak sentences if you had not first been given language. You were given language, and that means you have the ability to create and express yourself with sentences, with thoughts, with conversation. You can have a spectacular vernacular because language was given to you before you were even born. It was created for you. So when it comes to being creative, if you want to be more creative, if you want to be a writer, if you want to be a songwriter, if you want to be a painter or whatever, you have to take it in. The brain is like a sponge. You take things in and you squeeze them out. You want to do an exercise? Every night before you go to sleep, read one short story, one poem, and one essay. Wake up in the morning and try and write a short story. You write one short story a week, I guarantee you, you will become a writer. You will start, even if nobody reads your stories, you will be creative. You will be turning out 52 short stories a year, and as Ray Bradbury said, I defy you to write 52 bad ones. It can't be done. Everybody has the ability to be creative. Everybody can become something creative, and they can turn their negative experiences into positive experience, and even better, they can capture their positive experiences in life, and they can even create something out of them so that other people can learn from and benefit from your own joy in life, which is a giving thing, a good thing. Now, very quickly at the beginning of this podcast, I mentioned that creativity leads to happiness. Now, why does it lead to happiness? Well, for a variety of reasons. One of them simply being pride, the fact that you feel good that you have created something. Number two, because dopamine is released in the brain, which is the brain's good mood chemical, the happy chemical. If you set your mind to a goal and you start to achieve the goal, dopamine starts to be released, which makes you feel happy. When you achieve your goal, a rush of dopamine is released, which makes you feel extremely happy. It's actually the same chemical that gets released when people snort cocaine. So the fact is being creative will actually give you a natural high, an enormous high, and it's a high that does not wear off. When people take drugs, they usually say that the first time they took the drug was the greatest time they took the drug, the most exciting, but the potency starts to wear off. Whereas a creative person might, say, write a short story, get the same rush like someone who snorted cocaine, and then they'll write a better story, so they'll get a greater rush. Then they'll write a better one and they'll get a better rush. Then they'll write a novel and they'll get an enormous rush. So the fact is creativity does produce happiness, the same as a pianist might learn a little song, feel good about himself, then he'll write a better song, or they'll learn a bigger song, a more complicated song, and the harder it is, the better the accomplishment, the better the natural high. And it's an incredible high, a high that everybody on earth as a human being is entitled to, but not so many experience because they are not encouraged, pushed in the right direction, and they are not told that they are in fact creative. Therefore they are not getting the natural reward chemical that they are entitled to get as a good, great, miraculous human being that each and every one of us is. That sounds a bit cheesy, but it's true. We are all miracles. Anyway, put that in your pipe and smoke it. Now, there's a second reason why creativity makes people happy, and that is because when you look around at your house, it gets dirty, doesn't it? And it's a bit of a fuss, it's a bit of a problem when things get dirty, so you want to clean it, and when you clean it, you feel a bit better, things are back in order. Well, what happens when your mind gets dirty? What happens when your mind gets cluttered? What happens when your mind is like accumulated with too much lint and problems and darkness and all kinds of things going around in your head that you don't want in your head? Well, you want to be able to clean it. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to spring clean your own thoughts, spring clean your own mind, dust out all of that garbage that's gone into your head? Of course. And what's the best way of cleaning that crap out of your head that's built up over God knows how long? Creativity. Creativity is the best way to get the negativity out of your head. As John Lennon said about songwriting, it's like getting the poison out. As Ray Bradbury said about writing, he described it as being like soot in the chimney of the mind, banging the soot off of your internal chimney, getting it out. Over the course of your life, you want to take in lots of positives. Like I said in the previous podcast, you want to keep the positives, but you cannot avoid taking in the negatives. You don't want to keep the negatives. You want to get them out, and creativity is the best way to get them out. It cleans your thoughts, cleans your mind, turns the bad into good, turns the negatives into positives. And why are we all here, in my personal opinion? To make the bad good and the good better. I had to throw that in one more time, didn't I? So anyway, there you go. That's my rant. That's my tirade. That's my views and thoughts and opinions on creativity and happiness. And I know I went all over the place. I bounced back and forth, perhaps a bit like a wrecking ball, trying to knock down the walls of culture, trying to knock down the confines of our own narrow pop culture world that we are all trying to grow up in, like grass pushing through the pavement, trying to crack it. That's always a wonderful thing when you see grass breaking through concrete, that little thing that's somehow stronger than what we have created and put above it. Isn't it? Isn't it interesting? The red rose up in Spanish Harlem. You ever heard that song by the Mamas and the Papas? Anyway, so there we go. That's that. And I'm sure I've got a whole lot more to say, because I always do. Isn't the internet marvelous? Isn't it interesting? I think I've given you enough food to chew on in your brain. Food for thought. Food for your mind to chow down on. Chow down, wide load, as he says in Stand By Me, a movie that I highly recommend. And the book, the novel, the novella, it's called The Body by Stephen King, that the film is based on. The film by Rob Reiner, a very good film. Watch it, enjoy life, go out, be creative, find love friends, find friends that love you, love and work. What else is there really? See ya.